My name's Ross Duncan. I'm Chief Marketing Officer for First Point USA, and I'm delighted to welcome our guest speaker along here this afternoon, Colton Cariaga, who's head coach for Harvard University's men's rugby program. So it's a real pleasure to have Colton on the call with us today. Obviously one of the world's, if not the world's most prestigious academic institutions. So it's a great honor to have you on with us this afternoon. And thanks for giving up your time to chat to us about all things Ivy League, playing rugby and studying. So Colton has been at Harvard University for a couple of years. Prior to that, he was at Life University, who've got a very strong rugby program. And as coach, Colton led them to 2 national championships, 15s and 2 at 7s as well, and was also a student athlete at Life University as well. And he also happened to coach our head of rugby, Jamie Beresford. So he's obviously done a pretty good job with Jamie. So yeah, we've got a few questions to run through on the webinar, just talking about various different topics around college rugby, around Harvard University, various kind of things around the development of the game as well in the States. And then if anyone wants to ask questions, there's a conversations box on your screen. So please feel free to drop your questions into that. We'll keep an eye on those, and we'll ask some of those questions towards the end of the session. So hopefully that's all clear for everybody. So yeah, we'll just kick things off. Colton, if you want to just tell us about your role at Harvard University, how long you've been there, and what it's like to coach there.
Yeah. Well, firstly, thanks for having me on, Ross, and appreciate you helping sort out my technical issues there, and your tech man as well. Fair play. I started the role in July of 2023. And actually, funny enough, I was thinking about it before the call. I was actually in Kenya for the whole first month on the job. I was coaching the USA under-20s in the Junior World Trophy. And then I sort of hit the ground running in August of that year. And so now I'll be starting my 3rd season in the role. And, it's been a lot of learning personally for myself. Obviously, it's 2 completely different environments. My previous role to my current role, my previous university to my current university, as well as 2 very different regions of the United States. As you mentioned, Life University was, very heavily rugby focused, and, does wonderful things there from a rugby standpoint, and just a growth and development standpoint. And then obviously Harvard is, extremely exclusive, in terms of admissions and obviously, countless superlatives, the grads there from Harvard have achieved, and even the those applying. And it's been interesting, really getting to know the group of guys and trying to lay some framework for us to be successful for a long period of time. And it hasn't been without any, hiccups or, lots of learning. We're still sort of in that phase, just building. But at the same time, just, really getting to admire like all of the things that the guys get themselves into here academically and otherwise. It's really special. And, I think just on the rugby side of things, we're just trying to, build some special experiences on that side of things as well. So yeah, it's been great.
Sounds good. And as I said, I think Harvard's arguably the most famous university in the world. Do you still have a little bit of a pinch me moment thinking I'm working at Harvard University?
Yeah, definitely. I know it's true for, probably for international, students and folks, outside of the US to sort of know and hear about Harvard. But certainly as well for us Americans, like Harvard is, you hear about Harvard all the time. You see movies about Harvard, you see, films about Harvard. It's in the news cycle just about every day. And, to be here amongst it is, it's honestly, yeah, it is a bit of surreal. And I'll say I have the habit sometimes of Googling my own players or colleagues or alums, and I'll just say it never ceases to amaze some of the things that I find out about these guys. So yeah, it's pretty special. But also, Cambridge is a pretty lovely place as well. Just when it comes to the history, art, museums, there's so much to do. And then Boston's just down the road as well. And like, obviously as a big sporting enthusiast, I love rugby, of course, but I love all the American sports as well. And, I love going to the odd Celtics game, or actually went and saw the Patriots play last weekend as well. And just the sporting culture here is pretty next level. And it's awesome. It's awesome to be here and be a part of it.
That sounds like a great place to work and live, certainly. And moving then specifically to rugby, so where does the Harvard men's rugby program fit in the kind of wider landscape of US college rugby, and obviously comparing it to some of the powerhouse rugby programs outside the Ivy League conference that you play in? Where do you think it sits at the moment? Yeah,
so without getting too caught in the weeds here on this, because the rugby landscape here in the U.S. is extremely confusing, and it's difficult to try and get a beat on it. But there are essentially two leagues, and I think either league would probably say that they're the best, but I think in fairness to both, there's some really strong programs in either, and the different leagues have different things going for them. We sit in what's called the National Collegiate Rugby Organization, the acronym NCR. I'll use. And that is a larger concentration of Northeastern United States teams. So a lot of New York, New England, that region, and then on down the East Coast, that tends to be where the concentration of teams are. And then the other organization is predominantly Southern and West Coast programs. So it is a bit of it's split, pretty heavily along geographical lines. But there's other reasons that programs choose, the different leagues. I would say that Harvard specifically, we are a strong club program, but we are a club program that essentially competes in in what I would call like a tier 1 competition in the grand scheme of the collegiate landscape. So we compete against programs that offer scholarships and have heavy recruitment, and have different levels of support from their university sport department. We essentially don't have any of that. We kind of function as an independent organization from the university, albeit we have extremely strong rugby alumni support, and that allows us to be able to do some of the things that we are able to do, which is fund a lot of the aspects of the program, fund my position, allow us to travel, allow us to have a beautiful pitch that we play on. So yeah, in terms of other like institutions, we've got a lot going for our program. But then, in comparison to some of these tier 1 programs that have, specifically, recruitment access and scholarships, it's a bit of it's a growth area for us. And we're certainly chasing those programs to be competitive with the best of them.
Mm. Yeah, I think we've had a couple of rugby coaches on the past, and it's quite hard explaining the difference between the two rugby organisations in the States. So we did actually write a blog on it last year, so we can maybe share that in our follow-up correspondence with the recording of this. So thanks for that explanation. So what, in terms of if someone's an aspiring rugby player looking at the US, or they're a first point athlete at the moment who's maybe considering Harvard as a potential option, what would your message or advice be to someone who's at those stages of the process when it comes to Harvard as a potential option?
Yeah, first thing would just be getting started early in terms of, specifically from a rugby standpoint. If you're interested in you're going to be joining the rugby club, then realistically you'd want all your info in at the absolute latest by June of that year. But obviously you can start much earlier than that, and would certainly encourage anyone to do so. I would say in addition to that, highlighting all areas that, specifically when it comes to applying to Harvard, but probably any Ivy, highlighting all the areas that don't have anything to do with rugby. So your academics and your extracurriculars outside of rugby. I think where highlighting the rugby side of things comes into play and might be important is if you've achieved something at a national level. So whether you've won, you've been competed for your schools, for your countries or your region's schools cup. I think that's that says a lot, and that's something that's on a national level. Or if you've happen to have been a part of either your national team or some of the assemblies associated with the national team, those are some of the superlatives that would really stand out and are pretty easy to explain for someone that may not have any, that might be sitting on an admissions committee that might not have any background in rugby. They'll at least know that, if you were involved in your national team setup or you were in your national schools cup final or thereabouts, that would speak to those individuals. So those would be, probably the two things would just be, getting started early, and then really positioning yourself as a candidate who excels in, maybe it's economics, math, the arts, engineering, and then having a little bit about your rugby profile, but not that being the feature of your candidacy.
Sure. Good advice. Thanks for that. And a question that we get asked a lot from prospective students is that, what is a day in the life of a student athlete look like? So from a Harvard perspective, how does that pan out between your kind of academics, where clearly it's a major focus, and your rugby, and how is that time split in your average day during the season?
Yeah, lots of learning from my standpoint, because where I came from, we could pretty much move the academic schedule around the rugby, and obviously it's complete inverse of that here. So what we do is, there essentially could be courses from anywhere from 9 to 5. And so we just do, where we are now, we just do everything after 5 o'clock. So on Mondays, we have a gym session. Well, we have gym sessions Monday, Tuesday, Thursday. Tuesday and Thursday are as a group collectively in our big gym on campus. And then we do a skill session in video on Monday evening, full on training Tuesday evening after we work out as a team. And then Wednesday is off. Thursday is another gym session. Then we train for about 90 minutes. And then Friday we have an hour for a team run. So and for the most part, we play most of our games on Saturdays. So it's a pretty standard sort of schedule that I think probably exists most parts of the world. And then the one thing we've added is because we have quite a few players who are new to the game, students who are new to rugby, we have a rugby 101 training on Wednesdays. And so like some of the senior boys will come in and help instruct that alongside the coaches. And so we've just had our first season doing that, and it's been a hit. So there is something virtually every day of the week for rugby.
Sounds good. A busy schedule, no doubt. And you talked about the pitch, and I've heard that the pitch is pretty incredible. So if you can just talk us through the facilities that are on offer for a rugby player, and how do they maybe differ from some of the other student athletes and some of the other bigger sports, I guess.
Yeah. I hope I don't throw you for a loop here, Ross, but is there a way could I share my screen?
Yep.
Okay. I see the button. I just want to make sure I'm not doing anything.
Yeah, you're in control.
Okay, here we go. Is that working?
That's good.
Okay, so it's got the pitch, and is the rugby pitch showing up on the left there?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. It's not for some reason it's not coming through the same way from my end. But as you can see, pretty special rugby pitch there next to the Charles River. There's also a fair bit of traffic there. I don't know what's going on that day that the picture is taken, but yeah, it's fully standard length and width pitch, in goal area, a good seating section there to the south, and if you'll notice, there is a sort of a dome-shaped building just to the right, and that is actually where our gym is. And the gym there, the Palmer Dixon Strength and Conditioning Center, is what's pictured on the bottom right. And that has actually just recently been renovated, so they've doubled the number of racks. So there's about 100 workout stations in that gym. So we typically are in there. It's about 35, 40 of our boys in there on Tuesday and Thursday, as I said, and that's still only maybe a quarter of the capacity of the gym. And we normally are in there with a couple other teams at any given time. We have one of the staff members on our actual rugby coaching staff is a strength and conditioning coach. But we also have access to 3 or 4 interns typically that work for the strength and conditioning department that works with the entire athletic department. And so between our resident sort of rugby coach, who is a strength and conditioning specialist, teams up with the interns in the sports department to train our team. So our guys get some really quality coaching in the gym. Usually 4 to 5 folks, which is is pretty like it's not something that I even experienced at my former university. So it's really, really strong from that standpoint. And then to the top right, you'll see the football field with a dome over the top of it, and that's where we train. And for mainly just February is when we're in there, when there tends to be a decent amount of snow on the ground. And yeah, so all the teams on campus get to use the football field when the team's not in season, just to stay out of the snow. That's my I'll stop sharing.
That looks impressive. I'm sure everybody on the call would be very jealous of using those facilities. And are those facilities for the men's and women's programs then?
Yeah. So it's essentially, we're really the only 2 teams that use the pitch. I mean, sometimes some other sports will use it as overflow, but it's just it's ours.
Fantastic. And you kind of touched upon it earlier, but the structure of the rugby season for teams that play NCR 15s. You guys obviously play in the fall. You're in season now. It'd be good just to kind of share how that works with people in the audience who might not be familiar with the college rugby season, and I guess talking about 15s and 7s.
Yeah, so the season starts pretty quickly once everybody shows up on campus. And, we essentially play every weekend, save for maybe one off weekend throughout September, October, and November. And then we have like the big Thanksgiving holiday towards the end of November, which is typically off. And then there's a postseason the first couple of weeks in December. And that's all 15s. And, in our competition, we play, firsts and seconds play every weekend. And then we have a pretty lengthy break from about mid-December to the last week of January. The last week of January tends to be the first week back of the spring term at Harvard. And then we go into about a month-long preseason where we have a competitive sevens side. And then we also play some developmental 15s in the spring as well. So we'll play probably 4 to 5 15s development matches where we'll have like guys that need experience and need more game time, specifically in particular the tight 5. Some of the bigger boys that maybe won't play sevens, and then we play essentially 4 to 6 tournaments of sevens across March and April, and then the national tournament for sevens is at the last weekend in April. And the week before that is actually the Ivy Sevens Championship, which we've hosted the last 2 years. So there's uniquely 15s in September and October and November, and then a mix of sevens and 15s, competitive sevens and developmental 15s in March and April.
Yeah, so it's not too unlike some of the countries, certainly here in the UK, then when it comes to the structure of the season. And who would be the kind of the leading programs that you've been up against this year then?
Yeah, the Ivy programs that we compete against in our tier, Brown and Dartmouth are very strong, and they've made developments and progress within their programs for many years now, probably decades. Certainly Dartmouth, and then more recently Brown has had an uptick. And then there's there's a kind of a mix of some other programs that rise and fall depending on the year. And then the other Ivies compete in sort of another division sort of below that. So the sort of the 3 Ivy programs that are really sort of pushing to be competitive nationally would be Dartmouth, Brown, and Harvard.
Yeah. Good. And I suppose we've got quite a mix of nationalities on the webinar this afternoon. What is the standard like, I guess, compared to maybe some of the leading clubs and schools, certainly here in the UK or Ireland or maybe Australia and South Africa, where we also see athletes coming from? From your perspective, what would be the sort of comparison in a top Ivy League program for rugby?
Yeah. I think I can give a pretty good comparison. So after I graduated uni, I went and played for Trinity in Dublin, and then also coached in Blackrock College. And I would say, now that was about 12 years ago. And Trinity was in the second rung of all Ireland League teams at that point in time, and I think they are back in the second rung again. But I would say, regardless of whether it was 12 years ago or present day, I think the Trinity first would probably, I could pretty confidently say, would probably win the competition nationally in the U.S., regardless if it was the league we're in or the other league that I spoke of. And I would often sit on the bench for the first, and then I would start for the seconds. And I would say the Trinity seconds would be still a fairly competitive college program here in the U.S. And so I don't know if that's helpful for any of if there's anyone on the call from the Southern Hemisphere or not, but hopefully for the UK and our Irish boys, and maybe that's helpful.
Yeah, no, that's good. And I think from First Point's perspective, we share a lot of our rugby commitments on our social media and give backgrounds to where players have come from, both from schools and clubs and regional academies as well. So hopefully, again, anyone on the webinar this evening can have a look at that and just see where some of our athletes are coming from and the kind of levels that they're playing at. So that's hopefully helpful as well. We also get quite a few questions about, playing rugby beyond college or university in the States and the MLR. Again, we've had a recent one of our alum has gone on to play for New England Free Jacks, I think it is, and the MLR got drafted quite high up the college draft this year. So in your opinion, Colton, what are the prospects like for a top college rugby player then who maybe has aspirations to play Major League Rugby?
That's another it's an ever-changing landscape. Professional rugby, but especially professional rugby in the U.S. It sort of ebbs and flows, and without maybe speaking out of turn here, I think there might be a push to be more American now than ever in the MLR. I think the MLR went up to about 11 roster spots reserved for international players, for non-US eligible players in the last few years, and from what I'm hearing through the grapevine, that might actually be going down again. So out of just pure transparency, I think it will probably get a little bit tougher for international players. But if I think on the flip side of that, I also believe that time spent now as a student in the U.S. counts towards residency. I believe I certainly would encourage you to do your due diligence on that. But from what I understand, that the 4 years or potentially 5 years that you spend in college could potentially be enough to be considered a resident and eligible for the United States. So if that's the case, then whether or not you're considered international or not is kind of a non-factor at that point. I'll just say, from a level standpoint, there's tremendous opportunity to go in and have success and see game time in the MLR, because again, it's just like the collegiate landscape. It's a growing it's a growing environment for players, and it's really just an opportunity for guys to get out and sort of get some exposure and play in a growing league. So it is I'd say, the MLR is it's good, and there's some opportunity, but then there's also a bit of uncertainty at any point in time with the league. So
sure. And do you see rugby, obviously it's a fast growing sport in the States, got the World Cup coming up in a few years' time. Do you see that growth of rugby benefiting the college game and maybe moving more towards becoming a varsity sport in the men's game?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's already seen tremendous growth over the last 20 years. There really weren't any varsity programs when I was, looking at colleges as a young kid, and now there's, probably close to 100, I would say. So there's already lots of growth at the college level. It is a recognized varsity sport in the women's game. And, I think sort of the thing that we talk about here in the U.S. is once the U.S. had a soccer World Cup or a football World Cup in the early 90s, then the growth of soccer really took off here in the U.S. And, I was probably just a little kid when that was going on. But from what I hear from, some of the older folks in the game is, rugby, where rugby is now in terms of its development and the stage of its development was pretty similar to where soccer was in the early 90s and late 80s. And so, thankfully the U.S. qualified for the World Cup a couple weeks ago. And, we'll be hosting in 2031 and then also the Women's World Cup in 2033. And I think, if we can look at that model and sort of analyze the model with soccer and how that exploded and our national team in soccer still is, ebbs and flows and has some success, but just in terms of like the opportunity for young soccer players in the US is just exploded. And every kid plays soccer now. Like I played a little bit. Every kid in the US plays soccer when they're a kid. And the hope is that with hosting the World Cups that'll be similar. And then whether or not we're competitive or competing for a World Cup is one thing, but in terms of participation, I'm sure it'll have an explosive impact.
Absolutely. Exciting times ahead in the States, I think. And just moving back then to someone, considering Harvard or has an opportunity to apply for Harvard, what sort of qualities do you look for out with the sort of technical aspects of rugby in a potential candidate? Is that, kind of leadership, or is it more looking at the academics, or is it kind of, a rounded individual as people speak about?
Yeah, well, I definitely say speaking for Harvard, Harvard is certainly very interested in well-rounded individuals. In some of my conversations, I've heard, that might not necessarily be the case at some of the other Ivies, not to name any, but, at maybe some other schools, they might be looking for a really high peak in a particular discipline, whereas Harvard really wants to see a sort of really high level across multiple different disciplines. And so that's one thing. It's sort of a multi-dimensional view of a candidate. And that's where, I talked a little bit about, not just overrepresenting yourself as a rugby player, but, not that that's unimportant. It is important. Athletics and sport is very important, but, academic, whatever your academic areas that you're really strong in is important. Other extracurriculars, whether it be arts or community service or startups or, whatever it might be, and sort of showing your prowess across multiple different categories is really important. And, it's interesting the way I'll just give a quick little aside, the way that they pair housemates is very much, you'll have, each housemate will be probably pretty strong in a particular area, and it might not necessarily be, 4 or 5 of the same in one house. And so they're essentially building teams in the residences where you can get I can learn more about the arts from this housemate, and I can learn more about math from this housemate, and maybe this one's more sport inclined. And so everything that Harvard does in the way that they build the environment on campus and the culture on campus is really just about being exposed to as many different disciplines as possible, and trying to gain a really robust understanding of a lot of different areas.
Great, thanks for explaining that. That's very helpful. And then again, just if you can talk us through the process and the timelines for applying to Harvard. I know it's obviously can be quite a complex way of going through things, and obviously that's where we can assist as well at First Point USA. But if you can summarize what certainly the time scales would be and how to go about applying.
Yeah. So the big ones are the early application, which is officially is restrictive early action at Harvard, is November 1st, and then regular decision is January 1st. With early action, with the November 1st application deadline, students typically receive decisions mid-December, and then with regular decision, that's normally mid to late March is when they'll hear a decision. Specifically around like the sport side of things, as I said, like getting in nice and early is great, and the chance to sort of get some feedback on your application and those sort of things. Typically you'd want to have all your information put together and in front of someone at the latest June, and that's less of a sort of an official pathway and more of just getting in touch with coaches on the front end.
Okay, great. And clearly, the life of a student athlete is a busy one, as you talked about. And obviously, there might be other sports that the sporting side is bigger. But just how does a student athlete achieve that balance between their academics and their sport? And for somewhere like Harvard, do athletes get a special assistance or more support than a regular student would on the academic front?
Yeah, I mean, Harvard, takes a lot of pride in their admitted students versus students who graduate, and they simply they're not interested in any of their students not graduating. So I think Harvard goes well out of its way to support any potential struggling that a student might go through, in terms of like just general care, for someone who might be going through maybe a bit of a crisis or culture shock or whatever it might be. I know that's also pretty strong, the support that the university and like some of our students, guys that have played rugby before, have taken advantage of that. Some of the resources that they have around that sort of care. So yeah, the university does has had many years to sort of perfect that that support. So I know it's pretty strong there. And yeah, in terms of student athletes, they have us coaches as a resource. But I think what the school provides outside of like even sport is pretty strong as is.
And just looking back on your time at Life University, then obviously one of the biggest rugby programs in the country, tremendous amount of success in rugby. What was it that made Life stand out from the other programs by way of kind of getting that position as one of the most successful programs in the country, Colton?
So I'll just simplify my answer to probably two things. One is at virtually no other university in the United States will rugby be the number one sport, and it still is at Life University, and it has always been. There's no American football team at the university, and so yeah, it's just everybody on campus knows about the rugby program. Everybody on campus supports the rugby program, from the faculty to the students, to the groundskeepers. Everyone is pretty mad about rugby. So that's number one. And then number two, it has this sort of system of developing players, and then those players coming back and helping coach. And it's kind of a similar thing that I witnessed when I was at Black Rock in Ireland. It's just a factory where, guys go on and they become professional rugby players, and then they're instantly back coaching the younger age groups, and just constantly pumping out and developing the talent, and recycling really high level people back into the program. And that's another thing that life has had going for it the entire time I've observed.
And they finished runners up in the national championship last year, so they're going to go one better this season then.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I definitely wish my alma mater all the best, for sure.
Good man. And speaking of which, the alma mater at Harvard's obviously hugely impressive, and again, a lot of the Ivy Leagues in general just talk about that alum network that a student can benefit from, post-graduation and looking for employment. Just talk about how that works at Harvard, and how much of a benefit of that for anybody studying at Harvard when it comes to finding a job.
Yeah, the whole culture at Harvard is, students are essentially applying for what could potentially become their job once they graduate, when they're in their second year, and they apply for their big internship, which comes after the third year of university, and they're doing that midway through their second year. If they do well on that internship, then the goal really is to get a return offer for when they graduate. So much of the university's resources and what the faculty is doing to sort of push the students into those opportunities is really just like getting everybody to focus not just on their academic and their extracurricular, but on work, and just driving all their efforts into work placements. So beyond even just the relationship that we have with our own alumni, the university's, a large part of the university's mission is getting the students out in front of these job opportunities early on in their university career. And like I said, some guys will all but know where they're likely going to work by their second year after they graduate, which I think is pretty incredible. I didn't know where I was going to work after I graduated. So
So it truly is life changing. So just a couple more questions from me, and then I'll read through a couple of the ones that have come through from the audience. What would be your single biggest piece of advice for anyone looking to apply to Harvard University or an Ivy League institution?
Yeah, I think if you can get someone who has an intimate perspective on the landscape, or on the specific colleges that you think you're interested in, someone who has an intimate view on that, who maybe might not be directly tied or involved or have a stake in the game in that particular university, I think is definitely pretty key. So just finding a way to connect with some individuals who who have good knowledge of the landscape, but maybe aren't incentivized to push forward a particular destination. And then I would say visiting, finding a way to either visit, and if it's not possible, then just getting on the line with either the coach or some students from the particular colleges that you're interested in. And they'll be able to certainly advocate for their program, and that's going to be better than trying to get that information from a competitor or otherwise. You should probably just listen to, like for me, listen to me on on things Harvard and potentially Life University, just because I was there for so long, but don't listen to my opinion on, probably some of the other Ivies or et cetera. You should get that from them, so.
Appreciate that. That's great. I'll leave my other question till the very end. It's more about rugby in general, but question come in from Manuel. I'm not sure if you can answer this, but we'll ask you anyway. Obviously, Harvard doesn't offer scholarships in the traditional way like other universities. How can an international student find out about things like financial aid and how that works?
I'll drop the financial aid page into the chat, and what you'll actually find is so I believe, let me just pull it up because sometimes it changes, but so by the numbers, 25% of Harvard families pay nothing. 55% of Harvard students receive Harvard scholarship aid. The average parental contribution the parental contribution for the average Harvard student is $13,000 US a year, and then 100% of students can graduate debt free. Now, when folks talk about, technically, is there athletic scholarship or athletic aid? No, but the university itself does award aid, and it's purely based on income. And I believe the latest number is if a family's income is below 100,000 US, Harvard is free. And for those whose family income falls below $200,000 US, is free tuition, but not the living expenses. So as you can see, there although there's not athletic scholarship, there is other financial aid, and it's pretty substantial, just in terms of what the university awards.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that information, and that sounds very encouraging as well. Hopefully that answers your question, Manuel. Question from Alan. I guess you probably touched upon this. How does US college rugby compare to UK Bucks rugby programs? So I guess the top teams, I don't know, Edinburgh, Newcastle, Northumbria, Bath. You touched upon Ireland. Is it kind of similar to what you would describe Ireland as?
I'd have to get back to you on that. From what I understand, and I still speak regularly with my coach from Trinity, the level is pretty comparable between the teams in the All Ireland League and the Bucks Super Rugby. I think the difference, from what I understand, and I had a student who was I had a player that was considering Loughborough, going to Loughborough versus staying in Ireland and going to Trinity, and the difference for him was, and he's an aspiring national team player. The difference for him was, in Bucks Super Rugby, those boys are training like pros, and they're training, 5 days a week, gym, hitting the gym 4 days a week, video, the whole 9 yards. And in All Ireland League, it's still club rugby, although like Trinity at any given time will have maybe 5 to 10 Leinster players in their side. It's still they're still training maybe 2-3 days a week. So I think the level is pretty similar, but if you're wanting like a professional sort of rugby experience in terms of training environment, I think that's sort of the approach in the Bucks. But ironically, that sort of training environment you're starting to see become more commonplace at universities in the US.
Thanks for that. And final question from the audience then, touched upon women's rugby then. What would be, or where does the Harvard women's rugby program sit in terms of levels, and who would be the kind of leading programs at the moment in the States on the women's front?
Well, surprise, surprise, Life University's women's team is pretty strong. I think they won the national championship maybe 2 seasons ago, and then Harvard. The Harvard women's program is our back-to-back national 15s champions, and I believe they won the sevens national championship 2 seasons ago. So they're I would say close to Triple Crown, winners, if you could call it that, on the women's game. And they do have, on the women's side, as I mentioned earlier, women's rugby. There is an initiative for varsity women's rugby, which just means they have the full support of the athletic department, as well as admissions support with recruitment. And so the women's rugby team has managed to recruit some really strong women's student athletes for several years now, and you could see that that's definitely been paying off. And they've just been on an incredible run of success.
Fantastic. Yeah, sounds great. Okay, we're just about out of time, so appreciate all the questions coming through. Hopefully we've answered most of them. I know some of them are already covered in the initial discussion with Colton, so some good information there for you. Final one from me, and I'm slightly biased here, sitting here in Scotland, and we've got the USA rugby team coming over to Murrayfield next month for an autumn test match. How do you think that's going to go, and can you guys get one over on us Scots?
I'm not going to give a diplomatic answer, and I'll just tell you what's on my mind. Despite having many friends and colleagues in the U.S. setup, I look, it's the level, is just a different deal. Being able to compete in the Six Nations every year, and it's just the standard is obviously higher, and the access to the URC and guys that are in the Premiership and playing every week is just different. I think the U.S. aspires to the level of a Scotland, say, but I think can they beat Scotland? I think it'd be very, very difficult. Very, 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 very difficult. But of course they'll back themselves and hopefully try and put a dent in Scotland some way. But I will say, I'm excited about what they're trying to build, and they've got some pretty ambitious goals for 2 World Cups from now, when we host in 2031. So fully support the guys, win, lose, or draw. And Scotland's all right for me as well. I like watching Scotland play, so it's good.
Good. Should be a good game. We're looking forward to playing you guys. Always a great spectacle at Murrayfield. And it was great to see your women's sevens Olympic team winning bronze last year in Paris as well. So I think safe to say rugby is very much on the up in the United States. Colton, thanks very much for your time this afternoon. That's taken us up to the hour mark. So really appreciate the answers and the time that you've given. Hopefully for everyone who's been on the call, that's been a great insight into not only college rugby in the States, but life as a student and a student athlete at Harvard University. Pretty inspiring seeing the facilities that you guys have, talking about the sort of intern opportunities, and certainly truly is life-changing to study at Harvard. And if you have that opportunity, then absolutely seize it with both hands. So really appreciate your time. Wish you and the team every success for the rest of this season. And we'll hopefully catch up with you again soon.
Yeah, thank you, Ross. Appreciate that, and thanks to First Point as well as all the aspiring students on the call. All the best.
Great, thank you. Thanks everybody, and we'll share a recording tomorrow. Everyone who registered will get a follow-up email with all the information on it. Thank you.